cars and old barns. You know what they say? It's like an antiques roadshow dream come true around here.
Take a picture and go inside when we can light that up.
I'm taking a video. The video I did of that Lincoln Town Car got a lot of views for my channel. Like 20.
Weird. Those shine forward. Right in the mirror.
Early American engineering design flaw in the automotive field there. There's the engine.
Spare V8 engine.
Spare V8.
Spare parts. Yeah.
Oh man, I want to see a cool view down this house right here, where the river curves around the cliff right there. It's so cool.
Really? Yeah. Well, I like to keep the cuts. They're like triangles. It's not round like some of the others. Yeah. Well, that's why I think
You know, broad axe, they'd use a broad axe to smooth the side of it.
Petrified wood laying around. Petrified wood foundation. Almost. Look at that.
Pretty cool.
That's when the house had real value. When you built it all yourself. You cut down the trees and swung rats and hauled racks.
It's about 17,000 acres. It is currently in a nonprofit trust with the passing of DL's stepmother. The ranch went into a trust in the 2004 DL. Is that when the 2004 was put into a nature conservatory, a conservation easement?
Conservation easement in 2004, and the trust was established after she passed on in what was it? 15, I think she passed.
2015, it went into a trust. With the easement that it went into in 2004, the 17,000 acres cannot be subdivided, which is critical. Most of all, because there are actually only two large-scale ranches left in northern Larimer County, and that is the Roberts Ranch and the Ackerman Ranch, which abuts it to the east. Those are the only two ranches over 10,000 acres left. When you actually go through and look at everything else, it's already been subdivided down into 80, 100, 200 acre mini ranches, and a lot of those, as you'll see here along some of the edges of the ranch, are already starting to be subdivided into 5-acre home plots. So it's very critical that that happen on that, and so they can tear down a building, they can build a new building for the house that burnt down, but they can't increase even the number of buildings, so all of that is fixed at this time as well. DL, did you want to say anything about the cabin now we've got everybody in the building?
How big is the
They can't subdivide.
I think the B Centennial Farm now is down to only about 100 acres or so. They've sold most of it off. Most of that went to CSU as a...
10 acres.
Is it 10 acres now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very small now. Most of it went to the CSU, purchased the ranch, and is part of that educational center they have east of I-25. The other last ranch that existed prior to Ackerman Ranch and this ranch was the Maxwell Ranch, which upon Mr. Maxwell's death was donated to CSU with the province that his wife could live there until she passed away, and then it became a CSU property, foundation property. But everything else has been sold off.
For those of you who didn't hear what I had to say, this building was built by some trappers, according to my grandfather, in the 1850s. Dutch George and French Pete, he called them. And it was here, of course, when the Roberts family came. When I was a kid, we used it as a bunkhouse. But it's in pretty poor shape right now, and we're trying to get a grant to get it and the barn and actually all the other houses here as well back into good condition. I don't know what to tell you about that. If you've gone inside, be careful if you want to look upstairs because it's pretty shaky. And it's full of junk. We just haven't had a chance to clean it out, but we will. Any of you?
Yeah, we'd rather that nobody go upstairs in there.
Yeah, okay. Just
Yeah.
rather don't go upstairs.
Yeah.
I was just telling somebody that we have this resident bear that comes around for the apples. These are all apple trees. Some of these were planted by my great-grandfather. And if you notice, this one's got some broken branches. The bear's name is Maybe, and he climbed up to try to get the last apple off there and broke the branch. He comes around every fall, though. This house, while I've got you, was built in 1929 by my dad, Evan Roberts, and that's pretty much where I grew up. And I'm going to be moving into that house. Up to now, it's been lived in by one of the hired men who promised he would, I think this is gone out. who promised
Is
that
it
he
turned
would-
all the way up?
Yeah.
Okay.
He promised that he would clean it up when he left, and well, you can see he did, kind of. And so we haven't had a chance to really clean anything too much. But you're welcome. There's some stuff on the table in there. Some interesting photographs taken by a family friend that you might want to take a glance at. And there's a magazine there with a picture of Louis L'Amour on it. He wrote a book called Cherokee Station, which is on the ranch. And my dad took him out and he took a picture of Steamboat Rock from the top of the Devil's Washboard. Any of you who were here last year might have seen the Devil's Washboard. Anyway, I'll mention the other house while I'm about it too. That house was built in 1886 by R.O. Roberts, my grandfather, great-grandfather. And then he turned it over to my grandfather and grandmother when they were married about 1900. They lived there their whole lives, and when they died in the 1960s, nobody's lived in the house since then. But and it needs some shoring up and work, but we're going to try and get that restored, and eventually it'll become like a museum. What did you say in the ground? Somebody said they had some Roberts Ranch Preservation Trust is what the trust is called, and the point is to keep this land preserved as much as possible the way it is, as long as possible. They use the word perpetuity, which attorneys will tell you doesn't mean anything, but it does mean as long as possible. And there's a plaque on this house that says "Preserved in Perpetuity," if you notice. And we just want to try to keep it an operating cattle ranch and being the way it is now, so that people like you can come around and see it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
My grandfather said French Pete and Dutch George. I think those were derogatory terms in those days. They were racist.
And we tried to do some documentation on the ranch, a little research on that. You'll find Dutch George. There's a couple places on Cooter Canyon named after him, campsites and things. A lot of this area. There's a couple French George in history. Best I can tell, best guess is the one here. Also, is if you go out of Breckenridge to South Park, there's Frenchman's Creek. He was in the same area there. Again, a trapper that came out sometime 1840s, 1850s. It appears he went up to Wyoming in the 1860s as the Native American troubles started. He did not. He was married to a Sioux woman. Did not abide the warnings of some locals that told him to get out of the area because a band of the Sioux were on the warpath and was in a massacre, quote unquote massacre. There were about 6 of his fellow trappers, tradesmen that got killed as a result of that. And from what we can tell, that's the same French Pete from what we can track, but obviously with a nickname like French Pete, it's not the most definitive.
I want to mention one other thing. Yeah, the term Dutch George, you do come across that phrase. If not George, Dutch something else. What that was a reference to the fact that the person actually spoke German. It was Deutsch George, in other words. They would pronounce it, Americanized it as Dutch George, but these were German speakers with German accents. They weren't Dutch speakers, but people often referred to them as Dutch so-and-so because they were speaking sprechen to Deutsch. That's where that originated.
DL, if we could, I know a couple people on Facebook asked me about this. Could you tell a story about your your father and the Native Americans, your grandfather, and encounter on the ranch?
Well, Courtney, is this working now?
Just hold it close.
Yeah, it's working.
Well, my grandfather said, you know, in the early days, when they were first here, there were no fences. So the cattle would raise clear up into Wyoming and range out into Nebraska. And in the fall, the ranchers would go out and gather them and try and pick out which animals were theirs, of course. But they would be out for several days or several weeks at a time doing this. And my grandfather told me he made friends with some of the Arapaho, or I think they were probably Arapaho, maybe Cheyenne, up in Wyoming. And he told me a couple of interesting stories about them. One was that he stayed in the teepee with a family one night, and in the morning it had snowed a couple of inches, so the young brave got up, went out barefoot to catch his horse, and came back, sat down in the teepee, rubbed his feet till he got them dry and warm, put on his moccasins and jumped from the teepee onto his horse so he wouldn't get his moccasins wet. Smart. Another time he said he was invited because they were having a big party, and the chief came over to him and said, "Dig deep, puppy, and bottom." He never forgot that. I'll tell you another story, not about Indians, but up here to the west of this white property, we call that R.O.'s house. There's a alfalfa field up there, and in about 1915, they had just discovered they could plant alfalfa, and my grandfather was thrilled because it grew so fast and everything. So that was his prize alfalfa field up there. And his brother, who was much more progressive than he was, because my grandfather thought everything should be horse-drawn. You know, he was very big on 19th century technology. But his brother said, let's get a pickup. So the Ford dealer brings out a Model T pickup, shows George, my grandfather, how to get it running. And he goes right up through the middle of his prize alfalfa field, pulling on the steering wheel and yelling, "Whoa, damn you, whoa!" I'll give this back to Ray.
Can they go through both houses then?
Yes.
So we do that.
Yeah, we'll go through this house, and then you can go on through the other house.